Hi, everyone. Hi, Boulder Ruby. I'm Jesse Spevack. Dan, thank you for having me. I appreciate randomly emailing you and saying, hey, I have a talk. Can I give it? And you were just like, we would love to have you. So I appreciate that. And it's great to see everybody, a lot of familiar faces. Yeah, so I want to talk about, well, let me introduce myself. My name is Jesse Spevack. I want to share some observations that I've made kind of climbing various engineering hierarchies in the world. Right now, I work at a company called Stripe. Stripe does financial infrastructure for the internet. Raise your hand if you've integrated with Stripe. Okay, raise your hand if we've processed your credit card. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I've been at Stripe for almost 3 years. And before that, I worked at a company called Ibotta, which is a Denver startup that does cashback for shopping. I'm not like all about money, even though it seems that way from my career history. Before that, I was a student at Turing. I see some Turing folks here. Heidi actually taught me, sort of was like a mentor when I was a student. And then, and before that, in like, which feels like a totally previous life, I was an educator. I taught, and I was an assistant principal in public schools for a bit. And so, yeah. So all that is to say that everything I tell you right now is just my opinion, dude, as they say. So I'm not here as a representative of Stripe. They would not be pleased with that. And so I'm not trying to share the opinions of any of my past, current, or future employers. So with that preamble, I think that this talk, well, let me actually kind of get a gauge for where everyone's at. Can raise your hand if you kind of consider yourself a senior engineer at this point. Okay. Or we'll get there, yeah. Or and raise your hand if you're kind of past senior engineer, you're staff, principal, distinguished, whatever. Okay. And raise your hand if you're more of an early or mid-career dev. Cool. Well, the two of you got good stuff for you. Everyone else, you can give me feedback. So let me go over our agenda and talk about some goals and maybe some non-goals. So I'm going to very briefly share, I'm going to try to go very quickly through my career history just to set the stage of this is how I arrived at these opinions. And then I'm going to share a definition of what a senior engineer is that I stole from the internet. And we can, I'll get into that. And then the meat of the talk is just going to be what work is like or how I work as a senior engineer, and then we'll save some time for questions. So let's dive into career history. So I mentioned this in 2017, I worked at Ibotta. At the time, Ibotta had about 30 developers. When I left Ibotta, there were like 300 developers. I don't know the exact count right now. I'm guessing it's somewhere in the 300 range. But all that, I bring that up because when there were 30 developers, there were two job titles at Ibotta. There was engineer and senior engineer. And I was hired as an engineer with as kind of my first job out of code school. And I didn't really have any perspective for like what a senior engineer was. At the time, it felt like a senior engineer was basically like the people who are not accessible or who said things that were at all understandable to me. So like the less understandable you were, like the more senior you were in the organization. A few years go by and I got promoted to be senior engineer, and then another year or so goes by and I got promoted to be a staff engineer. So I have that experience of kind of climbing that hierarchy. In October of 2021, I started at Stripe, and I got hired as an engineer. So you can kind of see like some interesting trajectory there. And you might be thinking, well, you were a staff engineer at Ibotta, but now you're an engineer at Stripe. What is going on? So, actually, I'll just say L2. So a lot of companies use levels to designate your importance in the engineering hierarchy. And L2 is not the bottom. L1 is the bottom. L1 is someone who's right out of college, a new grad. So you can see I went from engineer to senior engineer to staff engineer to L2, which is just like the next level for someone who is just starting out of college. So putting that out there. So this, I don't think is super abnormal, and probably a lot of folks in here will have experience with this. You can kind of trade title, salary, company. I'm calling it prestige, but that's kind of like too snooty of a word, but like company reputation, quality of life. You can kind of make trades on those axes to optimize for whatever you're looking for. So in my case, when I went from Ibotta to Stripe, Stripe is much more well-known than Ibotta. I think that's fair to say. And so I was trading kind of on that prestige axis, on that reputation axis. And so I got a title decrease, which I think is normal.
Was there a money decrease?
There was not a money decrease. The money's good. So then the flip side, I work with a guy who came from Google. He spent 10 years at Google and then came to Stripe. So that's kind of like the reverse flow, so to speak. And so he kind of traded reputation, prestige, whatever, but got the title increase. So he wasn't getting that title increase that he wanted at Google. Stripe offered it to him, and it's a way for a company to attract someone. And I mean, you guys all know this. This is just something that companies do to take advantage of. No, this is something that companies do to lure, to get people to come to either more risky situations or less risky situations or whatever. So back to my exciting career. So now we're going to fast forward to 2023, I guess last year. I got promoted to be an L3, which is a senior engineer. And I've been there ever since. So this is my career history. So this is how I came to the opinions I'm about to share. So the next thing I want to talk about is what is a senior engineer. And I stole this from pragmaticengineer.com. Does anybody subscribe? It's not bad. It's really good, actually. And it has a prompt that you can put into your company to get like reimbursed for it. So you don't even have to like come up with the words to get your company to pay for this from your education stipend.
There's a free newsletter too.
Sure. But he's a nice guy. I want to support him. So,
or have Stripe support.
Yeah, fair point. So okay, so let's talk about different engineering levels, and we can plot kind of two axes here. There's the scope axis, which is the y-axis I have there. So what level of scope do you have control over? Do you take ownership of? So you could have an associate or new grad who's kind of given tasks, and that's the scope that they operate on. And you can go all the way up to people who run projects, people who have ownership over products, people who build things that the entire industry uses. And then you can kind of graph that against influence. So who are the people, or how wide is your influence in your organization? Are you the only person who you can influence? Can you influence a couple of people on your team? Can you influence your entire team? Do you have some sort of informal authority across your entire team? Do you influence multiple teams? Do you influence an entire group of teams, or an entire company, or an entire industry? So for senior engineer, I'm going to just put the definition as your scope is at the project level. So you're given projects to solve and deliver value on. And your influence is at the team level. So everybody on your team listens to you, not always, but usually, sometimes. And so that's kind of the sweet spot of what I'm going to be talking about here. And some of you are probably to the right and some of you are to the left, but we're going to talk about this little pink spot right there. We can also graph on influence versus independence. So this is another way to think about what a senior engineer is. Influence is kind of similar to who listens to you. Is it just you, peers, whole team? And then independence is like how much time can go by for you to, that's the wrong way to put it. How much time do people expect you to complete whatever it is you're responsible for? So if you're a new grad, new developer, junior developer, associate developer, whatever, maybe you're given something that they expect you to finish in a day or a week. If you're very senior, maybe you're taking multi-year projects on. For a senior engineer, what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this talk, I'm saying that is a month to maybe a year at most would be kind of the time frame that we're talking about. So with that totally uncontroversial definition of senior engineer, we're going to move on to what I do as a senior engineer. And I'm going to try to lay out like kind of an abstract high-level idea, and then I'm going to go into some examples that are going to become like increasingly more concrete. So the first idea that I think you need to have as a senior engineer is ownership. And what I mean by that is that I think as a senior engineer, you have to really believe that this is your problem to solve. And there are a couple, I guess, like failure modes that I think are common where we fail to show ownership. So the first one is complacency. So complacency is this idea where you finished Jira ticket 1, 2, 3, and there is no Jira ticket 1, 2, 4, and so you don't have to do anything. That is the wrong approach, wherever you are in your career. And I think like nobody like the reason this is a lucrative field is because we're not like task rabbits, right? Like we're not given do step 1 and then come back and then you get step 2 and then come back and you get step 3. Like we make that map for ourselves. And if you are being complacent and you're waiting for whatever that next step is, that's not really showing ownership, and that's not how to advance in this field. The next failure mode is spending your time on the wrong problem. I think this is really hard, especially for new developers, because as a new developer, you come across something that you can do, right? Like, oh, they want me to run the Ruby script that I just wrote? Like, I'm going to do it. It's so exciting to actually get something that you know how to do. It's really hard to not just do it. But sometimes you have to not do it. Sometimes it's the wrong thing to be doing. And if you are spending all of your time on the wrong problem, you're actually not taking ownership for what you're there for. So like a good heuristic for this, or a good way to think about this is like, someone, Bill from support, asks you to run the migration that you helped him with the other week, or run the script, but with this additional use case or whatever. So maybe you can do that, and it won't take you very long. Maybe it will take you long. But think about like who you have to like kind of report to next, like, and what they're expecting to hear from you. So if at the beginning of the week you're like, I'm gonna ship 18,000 new bills that are screen reader legible, and then Bill asks you to do this thing and you do it, at the end of the week when you're saying, what's the status of those 18,000 bills, how are you going to feel when you say, I didn't do those 18,000 bills because I was helping Bill? If you are going to feel great about that, then it might actually not be the wrong problem. But if that's going to be a conversation that you dread having, then that's a good sign that that's the wrong problem to be working on. Okay, the third failure mode for ownership is being stuck. And there's like 2 ways to do this badly. And I've done them both, so that's why I know. So the first one is like you're stuck and you prematurely ask for help. So this gives everybody around you the impression that you're not taking ownership of the problem. You're not like exercising all the possible tools in your toolkit to try to figure something out for yourself, right? This is like, hey, that question you just asked me, if you just put that into Google, there would be your answer for you. The second option, and I bet that a lot of us fall into this one probably more, is like you're stuck, but you don't ask for help quick enough, right? You're stuck for too long. And I think that actually shows poor ownership or low levels of ownership, because it means you're like letting too much time go by before you produce value. and you're not calling out the dangers there. Okay, so how do you actually show ownership? Do the work. I think that this is like the work of being a software engineer is to persevere through the discomfort of uncertainty. And we've all been there, right? Like you have this thing, you don't exactly know how to do it. In fact, you're not even sure like what to call it. And it's really uncomfortable. And I've worked with people who are like incredible at this and can just live in that space for forever. But this is something that we have to like build as we grow our careers. One way to do this, I think, is this idea of push-ups. So if you are familiar with the exercise, and it's been a while, maybe it's been since high school that you've done a push-up. When you do a push-up right now, it is not going to feel great. It is going to be difficult. If you do a push-up every single day for this week, at the end of the week, it's still not going to feel great. It's like not a very pleasant activity. If you do a push-up every day for a year, and then at the end of the year, the next day, you don't do a push-up, your body's actually going to feel weird. It's going to be like, wait, something's off. I should be doing something. So there are push-ups in our line of work. These are the things that are like in isolation, annoying to do. But if you do them a lot and you do them consistently over time, they actually make your job easier to do. And the same is true with push-ups, right? If you do a push-up every day, then like the things that actually matter, like picking up your kids or putting your groceries in your car or moving your luggage at the airport, all that stuff becomes easier. The stuff that you actually want to do to live becomes easier. And so what I would say is you have to find the push-ups in your work and do those things every day. So what are examples of this? Examples of this are cleaning up logs, like making logs more readable. Like nobody likes doing that, but that's a great push-up to do. Packaging files, so code ownership is super clear. This is stuff that helps your team, that increases the maintainability of your code, and will make it so that you are basically like a coiled spring when it comes time to actually do the actual project. So the next thing is you need to get things done. And it's very important that you do the right things. And I guess like the way that I think about doing this, this is a kind of the first concrete tip. I keep a stack rank, a public stack rank. And a stack rank is just a fancy way to say to-do list. And if you say stack rank, people will think you're an engineer or something. So I keep a public stack rank where I order all of the things that I want to get done in order of what I think the priority is. And this is public in my company. Like everybody at Stripe could see it. Most people won't want to see it, but it is available. And what that allows me to do is that when Bill from support comes in and says, hey, can you run that migration for me? I can be like, okay, cool. Here's like item one, item two, item three in my stack rank. That thing that you just asked me is not more important than those three things. So it's going to go in the 4 slot. And Bill, here's when I'm going to get to that. Maybe
top 3 things like real things, or you're just trying to push Bill off?
It depends. Is it both are good, but you know, it's valid.
I haven't figured out the first 3, but you're number 4.
It's a valid point.
We don't have a Bill in here, do we? Bill's getting a lot of heat.
It's a valid point. So, and you could actually turn it to Bill, and you can say, hey, Bill, I don't know if, like, you're telling me that the company is about to fold if I don't do this thing for you. Is that true? Like, is it really more important than these 3 things? And having that public stack rank, I think, makes that conversation feel better, at least from where I sit. I don't know if it feels better for Bill. Yeah, so public stack rank. It's also like good to, you have this artifact that you, when you're talking to other people on your team, your manager, the people that you report to, it's just super transparent and very clear. Here's what I'm working on. Do you agree? Right? Like, these are the top 3 things that I'm spending my attention on. Are there any problems? Cool. No problems. We're going to keep going. Okay, but the next thing is saw sharpening. Raise your hand if you've heard this phrase. Okay, most people have heard this phrase. It's like when you are a lumberjack, which I have a lot of experience at, and you're cutting wood with a saw. At some point, you have to, if you want to cut wood in perpetuity, at some point you have to stop because your saw becomes dull and you need to sharpen your saw. And so the exercise is like balancing, if I never sharpen my saw, I will cut some wood and then never be able to cut wood again. And if I only sharpen my saw, then I will never actually be cutting wood. So there's like a fun little optimization problem there. So saw sharpening are these secondary productivity tasks that we all do, whatever level of engineer we are. But as a senior engineer, your saw sharpening should have that increased scope. So it's not just I'm changing my bash RC file because there's this command that I always run. Let me do this so it's helpful for the rest of my team. And what are the ways that I can write documentation that helps my entire team, for example. How are we doing on time? We're okay. We're okay.
You got 10-ish minutes, 10, 15 minutes?
I won't take everybody's time. I won't take all of that time. I will jump into another way to show ownership. Another way to show ownership is mentorship. And this is because you, as a senior engineer, you're not paid for just your own work. You're paid for your work and to augment and positively augment the work of everybody around you. You should be improving everybody in that team scope that you're in. So how do you do mentorship? I take this kind of matrix from my time in education. So there's this idea of like standards versus expectations. So having high standards would be like, we test everything and we believe in craft and care about our users. Low standards would be more like, sure, just ship it. We're not going to test it. It's fine. And then expectations are kind of like high expectations would be, or low expectations would be, you can't do anything around here because like the code debt, the technical debt is so bad. We operate in a bowl of spaghetti and we can't make any progress, or that those engineers are not smart enough, whatever. So high expectations, obviously the opposite of that. You want your mentorship to be in that right quadrant of high standards. The person you're mentoring, you have high standards for, and you also expect them to achieve those high standards. Because honestly, like that's where we all want to be I feel like that's where we all want to be mentored. And so that's where you should do your mentorship. More concretely, I have one-on-ones with my teammates. And so I use this time to discuss what they're working on. I try to ask a lot of questions and avoid giving talks like this and just ask questions. And by discussing and asking questions, I'm trying to help them grow. And the reason I emphasize asking questions and not just giving advice is because when you ask questions, you're actually building their capacity to solve their own problems. If the only way that they solve problems through mentorship with you is by you giving them advice, then you're not increasing their capacity. You have to train them and help them build those questioning skills that other people have helped you with as well. So I'm going to pause there because I'm not going to have time to get into this idea of transparency, but I do want to share just a few requests. First is I have a website. It's called verynormal.info, where it's just like my blog, and I write about software, career stuff. I write about my family. I write about music. I write about running, everything. Basically, it's kind of like MySpace for me. And so, I would love it if you take a look. I'd love it if you would send me feedback on this. And even more, I would love it if you wrote feedback about this and shared it with a wider audience. So with that, I'll open up to any questions, and I appreciate everybody's attention.
like that chart that you talked about influence in like your peers. It's like one before it. But so like that looks very cool. But I think at the same time, you're talking about your experience at Ibotta, you talk about experience at Stripe. I feel like those are potentially two different companies. I wonder if you have like a take on the title of an individual being more of a retention strategy than fitting into this cool looking graph.
For sure. I mean? Oh, for sure.
Because I feel like when you say Stripe, it's like got these L's and like people are taking the L, like when do they get the W? But like it's very different because like I've been a principal engineer before at a small company. I was like,
this is great.
I was old enough to know like this is bullshit or whatever. The comp is good. And now I'm a senior engineer at another small company. But like, to what degree is Ibotta creating staff engineer because like they're a small company, they're growing, like they don't want to lose the guys that know how to do all this stuff. And so anyway, it's kind of rambling, but just your perspective on that.
Did you have a
two quick questions? Let's see. One, is there any way we can get a few of these slides?
Yeah, I should
have loved to share that. The second question, I think when you were talking, it kind of reminds me that like I do down in mountain biking, like a black diamond and one mountain is not the same as a black
exactly
mountain, right?
It's like a black diamond in Ohio is a green.
It's like you just walk down it. It's like the funny. But the other thing I think, because you brought up a point about like you switch companies, right? And there's a certain point that you just have to get breadth. I think a piece that might be missing is like the depth of experience comes from switching companies, not necessarily staying in the same vertical. Right, it's like when I first started my career, like I started at AT&T, and like there was a phrase like you'll never be rich, but you'll never be poor. But then there's people there that make money, but they're basically not worth like 50% of the salary in the open market. And they don't think that, like to your point, like they don't know that until like shit hits the fan and they're like, fuck me, this is bad. And they think that they learn that really quickly. And I think it's something that people need to be taught, like you get that value from bouncing around necessarily after a certain point, and just staying in the same seat for perpetuity.
We saw that in the industry big time during the frothy job market. I think it was sometime through COVID when like salaries went way up. The companies were having to promote to retain, even if they weren't seeing. Oh, sorry.
No. I'm saying the frothy part of the market.
Yeah.
And contractions are happening now and continue to happen because you can't borrow money, right? So that's a lot of companies that caught that early on, like stockpiled cash and like didn't hire, right? They stockpiled it and knew that this was coming. Or their investors said, hey, you have to do this, and to keep the run rate fluid.
My hot take. I think there's a natural psychological tendency to say, I am a senior engineer. That title, senior engineer, is a reflection of me, and it's not. It is a reflection of where you fit in the hierarchy at that particular company. So I think it's really about separating the title from the person.
And also, I recognize the irony in me saying this after just talking about how I'm a senior engineer, but like, if you have to say you're a senior engineer, then that undermines like you being an actual senior engineer. And I remember this like very meme moment in a Slack, professional, work Slack where someone was kind of being a jerk in Slack and like preface what they were saying with, as a senior engineer, and it's just like, come on, dude.
A lot of vanity titles.
Yeah.
Like people have signatures like, the MBA shit, the signature or stuff, like, I don't care.
I love the CTOs of their own company.
What's your title of one? You're a company of one. Is your title engineer or is it CTO or is it somewhere between?
I say founder. Founder architect.
See, I started doing principal.
So we're like in the middle.
Yeah, I switched that. That's a
I just interviewed a CTO yesterday and I got nervous because I looked at his resume and it said CTO. I was like, oh, it's just the thing, like your side project. Got it. Understood.
What really cracks me up is the really small companies that actually use C-suite names, right? Like CTO, CEO, and it's like you guys are not even you're not even at that level of like profit and income. It's like, and they're just throwing titles around, right?
Well, they have to on paper though. Like if they're funded, like somebody has to like technically.
And at some point, the goal is to grow into that organization so that you are that person.
Sure, but like I've run across like CTOs that are like, he's just a senior engineer, that just happened to fall into the role and it's like has all the power, so it's a political thing, right? It's like the title doesn't match the actual experience or the kind of mentorship or the kind of leadership.
We didn't have a CTO at Galvanize, but we always debated which senior engineer was that day. And we kind of knew after a while it was Peter.
And I think that like anytime, like after I've been a CTO of a 2-person startup, right? And it grew to like 4 or 5, blah, blah, blah. Like as soon as you do that one time, then you start to say, I'm not going to take anyone's CTO title without looking at the company that are in, because you know there are CTOs that have large strategic vision and they manage teams of hundreds of engineers, and that's a totally different skill set than mine of like shipping code and talking to customers. And guess what? That CTO might fail my role, and I might fail at that CTO's role. You just can't compare them.
Sorry, I was just gonna say to the earlier point of the title reflects your place in the company, even if the company.
Totally.
It's the inverse of that, right?
Justin, do you think the strategy for going to a staff engineer is more of the same but better, or do you think there's different stuff in there?
That's a good, you could ask the staff engineers in the room, but I think in general, my experience has been that if you want to get to the next level, you have to work at the next level. You have to be doing, if you want to make the case that you're a senior engineer, you already need to be doing all the things that a senior engineer, they're not going to take a chance and be like, sure, here you go, we think you'll grow into this. You have to already be doing it, and for some period of time, and you have to be able to make that case pretty compelling. It's the same, I think, at the staff level.
And I think the misleading thing in this chart is these aren't equal-sized bars.
Yes.
Mid-level is going to be very wide. Senior is going to be very wide. Staff, principal, and distinguished are very, very narrow bands. And staff principal and up imply a lot of architecture and less code. You know, but you'll go to some companies where staff is like, you're the best coder in the room, but that's actually not helpful in a peer team scope.
Oh, okay. Wasn't trying to.
Newly promoted staff engineer over there.
What did it take to get your promo?
Lots of expanding beyond my team.
So it was like being a staff engineer before you got the promotion.
And I was going to make the comment, at my company, we have lots of seniors. In fact, it's sort of almost a cliche. I think it kind of, you know, I wanted to be senior for so long, and then I realized, you know, to some extent, like I could look at any seniors in my company and be able to expect the same thing from any of them. Some are like more front end, some are back end, but the level of delivery should be about the same. Like once you start moving right from there, like you start getting archetypes. And I think that's, it took a lot for me to not look at other seniors, other staff, and be wary that I was not the same as them in like a particular area, because that wasn't my strength. And so I still have to like not judge myself, like that I'm not the same archetype that as others around me.
Sounds like you should do the talk, staff engineer.
In 2 years.
So are there like, but are there not like proto archetypes at the senior position? I think like,
we struggled with that at GitHub. We have what, like at least 100 staff engineers, and it's like so hard to tell seniors what to aim for because it's so less clear. Like I think the industry gets like really bad at this above senior. Because there's so much less clarity, and it's like you can't even be like, oh, go be that person, because like you probably don't need another one of that person. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And once you get past staff into senior, when you get into staff and above, there's a lot of soft skills too. Everybody needs to say soft skills, but there's a lot more politics. There's a lot more, you know, diplomacy.
Senior's great.
Diplomacy.
Senior's really great.
Unless they split it, right? Where you go down a technical track versus.
Well, I know.
No, you still have to negotiate.
No, still,
You still have to negotiate, collaborate.
My engineering skills did not get my promotion.
I am definitely not a manager.
I wanted to add one thing that, like, since there's different skills here and some principles and higher, like, you have to understand the bands of your company that influence this too. And I learned that really early in my career because money is everything to me. I'm not afraid to say it. So like I understand the bands in every company I work for, right? Because you can inherently be wrapped within one of those areas and you're not going to move because you're at the top of the band, and that's just the way it is. And that's where you inherently start looking externally because you can't get past it. And companies might not have the budget. That is, I mean, that's just economics, depending on where you're at, where your geography is. And companies do a really good job of trying, well, some do better than others, try to balance what that might be. And I think the other thing that I think this might be missing is the concept of generalization and specialization once you kind of reach kind of going up. Because that's where you have the general like staff, but I think in a lot of cases, even like where I'm at, like I specialize a lot on the API side. Like I don't like necessarily want to go to the front end, but I'll specialize on this. And then you keep going down that hole. Other people might be at that same horizontal level, but they're different focus areas. You can carve out niches that way too.
Another dynamic of that is that, at least at GitHub, and I've heard this at a lot of companies, senior is considered terminal, which means you are not expected to go above, and the business has to make a case that to pay you to do staff level work. So like what we run into a lot is people who are really used to climbing the ladder and they hit senior and they're like, where's my staff opportunity? And the answer might be there isn't one. So like we have that in our work. I do a lot of accessibility work, and we actually don't have a business need for a staff accessibility engineer, despite the fact that there are 3 seniors that would love that opportunity. So in order to get staff, they're having to leave the team. Thankfully, they can not leave the company. They can just leave to another team. But that's very common to GitHub. Or they kill me. Yeah. They ask me when I'm working on my promotion so I can leave a space for that.
Yeah, exactly.
It also shouldn't matter that much. I wouldn't say it also shouldn't matter that much. Like, I don't know, maybe this is me. I don't really give 2 shits about the title. Really, I care about the culture.
Because you care about the money.
The paycheck.
And the cash. Because once to your point, like once you hit the senior level, like there's variations, the plus and minus, a couple standard deviations. And I think that where you're working actually inherently is worth more than the money you're gonna get paid. So like, I love my team. You can offer me 50% more money, I'm not gonna leave the team. Like I like what I do, like I really like it. Like, and it's a great company. But like, there's other aspects, like different people, you might be in a shithole and get paid a lot of money, and it's not necessarily, is it worth it,
I think Jill sort of joked about this, but like seniors get to write code. Like that's kind of nice to be in that spot.
Right now, it's definitely a nice spot to be in.
I miss it a lot.
Yes.
If my company asked me to get a promotion there, I'd say, no, thanks.
A lot of companies, they don't give you, depending on the company you're at, you might not actually see a ton more money too. Like title bumps are often 10 to 15%. And would you take 15% more money to write like 50% less code?
Yeah.
That's also the compensation change, right? Like changes the percentage of your compensation of the salary versus
right. Like so we're stock
bonus.
Compensation companies, and that's
So
different.
You get like a big, much wider bars than what you could be making.
At GitHub, a principal makes like twice as much as a senior engineer, if not 3 times. So it's
because of the stock, though.
Because of the stock, versus the salary. The salary is
that different.
The salary is 20% more.
Right. And you go to a startup or 100% company. Sorry, Brooke, go ahead. You were trying to say something a couple times.
I was just going to say to your guys' point that you kind of need the math up there too, the length of time, because it depends on, I mean, if you want to climb the ladder, not really quite my game, but because I'm interested in the technical aptitude and the skills that you're going to grow, right? Versus playing the game and actually trying to get like the money in the package. There's 2 paths, right? And they're both fine. But you need to look at the math. This actually comes up in a book. It's a really good book called Developer Hegemony, written by Eric. I can't remember his last name, but it's a really good book that actually talks more about this. And you actually, if you're in the company, right, you actually want to look at the ladders. You want to do the math. And the math that you're looking at is like, if you're going after the money or the package or the prestige and the title, how long does it take you to get there? And can you do it faster elsewhere? And then also, if you're going down the technical track, and you want to actually grow your aptitude so that you can be a really, really good technical engineer, you need to know what that timeline is and how much time that is. And if you're just climbing the ladder, you can actually find out that you could be in a company that might be a great team, great pay and everything. But you'll find that like 10, 15 years later, you're sitting there, but you don't actually have anything that's like worthwhile to take elsewhere or do something else or actually become independent or go down that path.
Because you've been climbing someone else's ladder.
Right. And you should be thinking about your personal.
You have the ability to climb your own ladder.
Yes. Yep.
Well, that's another good point, is that it's not the company's responsibility to make sure you stay relevant.
Right.
So like I always say, like I'm always building in and outside the company. Like I run my own company on the side, I'm always building all the time. Like so I can use like some of the latest Rails technologies or even other languages I want to experiment with and get exposure to, and even build it, even make money on it and still be doing the W2 at the same time.
Yes.
Which helps with the company, helps them too. Like it helps you be a full rounded as once you get up like the higher levels.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that I think that like at some point in some companies, I think many companies, that technical expertise is going to, even if you are like world class, like that is going to there are fewer needs for world-class technical expertise than there are for people that are less than world-class but have technical expertise and the ability to like see a project through, especially a multi-year project. I just came from the Staff Plus conference, which is a lead dev conference, and there was a lot of people talking about it, and they were all, you know, many hundreds of engineers or more companies, and they were all about like, you know, I saw this problem and it was like 4 years till I was able to solve it, and it was a socio-technical problem. It was not just getting room in coding or even like, you know, patching Linux kernel. It was like I had to, you know, do 4 or 5 different things across different teams, and we had to like mature the company. And there's a lot of room for that, and I think that's a transferable skill, but it's a hard one to like give it a resume.
The idea Spike was mentioning, right? It's like coalition building, right?
Totally.
And yes, it's building code for machines. Though doing the code writing is a great way to do the saw sharpening of that secondary productivity. But there's this other element of working with people and building the coalition amongst the people for the ideas.
Even just discovering what the right idea is, right? Because you can say, we need to solve this, and then you dig into it, and it maybe actually you solve A, B, and C first before we do this, and then that informs this, right? Like it's almost like building a product inside the company.
And you're often doing that with no actual authority.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're just an engineer. Yeah.
And that's the best authority.
It's so much fun. Yeah. I call it power without responsibility.
Never heard.
Cool. Go ahead.
Just one last thing. The thing on mentoring is a really good one, and I want to ask if you've ever heard. Maybe others have read. I can find it and put it in Tech Friends later. If you've never heard of it, but it's like the worst engineer ever. Have you guys ever read that? No, it's really fantastic. To your point on mentorship, because it's a whole story about how this engineer was fired because he was the worst engineer ever, because they couldn't see any code that he actually wrote, right? But he was one of the most influential people to the team because he was there mentoring and working with the team, rolling up his sleeve, helping each member on the team. So basically the most valuable player, but never getting any credit for it because they were measuring for the wrong thing, measuring for the amount of code produced, the number of commits, the number of issues closed. This guy wasn't doing any of that, but he was uplifting in actually the atlas of the entire team. So if you've never read that, it's a really good poignant thing to share for people that are actually going into a mentorship role and what that means to be a really good mentor.
Did they hire him back? That's the question.
Now a CTO.
I don't know. I'd have to go look.
Caroline, you had a...
Yeah, I guess just 2 things. One, like I really appreciate the failure modes is what you called them. I've heard them called anti-patterns before. And that was actually when, like, at our startup, we defined our engineering matrix, and that was more useful of how to detect that you have leveled up to a senior level. You aren't hitting any of those anti-patterns. I feel like they're easier to understand.
Yeah, what not to do.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask, beyond was transparency the other main point, or were there more?
Yes.
I know, okay. So, yeah, I guess what I would expect to see too on this like big level topics is like quality, or just like instinct for quality, whether that be design patterns or smells or kind of that. Yeah, when you can smell it in the code. I don't know if other people felt that too.
I wanted to say something about the failures. At this end of the table, it sounded like failures was a negative thing. Whereas as a developer, engineer, I feel like failures are something that I need. And so like while I was listening to this, I sort of repurposed this as like a willingness to try new things from the failures that you're experiencing. Specifically, like, it's possible to recognize when I'm being complacent or when I'm focused on the wrong problem or when I'm stuck, and then if I recognize that failure, am I willing to make that change? Though I wanted to ask the worst developer, worst engineer. Is the idea of like a multiplier, is that a common thing in the industry? I'm fairly new to it.
Yeah, especially for people in the higher positions, like
staff or
leverage.
Yeah, and part of the reason why the role is so amorphous, because you have to tell your own story. And if you don't know how to tell your story, you do get screwed on that. Like I know some people that just like they do that work and it's like so effective, but they don't know how to talk about it. Versus like when you're a senior engineer, it's so like there's like a formula for showing how you're good at your job that's really easy to just be like, I'm a good senior engineer. But as soon as you go above that, what it looks like to prove that you're actually good at your job almost becomes your job.
Yeah.
It's how to measure the force multiplier.
Right. Like you can tell that story a lot of different ways, but you have to tell it.
I guess I don't know what it means to like tell your story in that context.
Well, document it. You literally say, like, so for example, for me, one thing I do, because my job is all over the place right now, it's batshit crazy, is I literally every day write a 3-paragraph update of what was the most impactful thing I did. And it literally just says, oh, I helped this person, I helped get them unblocked on this, and here's the PR they opened. I didn't even get a co-author tag on the PR, but I paired with them on it. You have to manually document those footprints, because if you don't, you are like, the best way to do it is to take a humble approach. So you literally aren't gonna be opening PRs or often even writing issues in my experience, but your fingerprints are there. So you have to call this out.
It's called breadcrumbing. So like breadcrumbing. So if you Slack,
exactly.
It's like breadcrumb, like for example, and I guess it's like kind of slightly benefits extroverts more than introverts, but like you'll tell like who's like, you don't even need to be in an office, especially if you're in a remote culture. Like you'll see going on, like if somebody needs help, like you're jumping on it, like you're kind of always collaborating, like one of the first ones to kind of rally.
I'm curious about who consumes that.
The manager.
Your boss.
Oh, leaders do.
Yeah.
They see who's doing what.
Your boss's boss.
Yeah.
It also
transparency done, just like for yourself and for the team. So if like what you're doing is measuring points scored when you're on the court, not necessarily points you scored, then part of the storytelling is like, as a team, look what we were able to achieve. And like your hand, not just in up-leveling that as a team, but the transparency to the team of delivering that higher value consistently. That's part of the storytelling.
And that's why it's a completely different job. Like if you like having direct, tangible outputs for your work, this is a great place to be. You don't need to go any further. It gets real weird when you leave that space because it's a lot less comfortable. And you have to think that way. And if you don't think that way, it's probably not for you.
Is it possible for other people to tell your story?
Yeah, but then you aren't a staff engineer.
Well, I heard that. That was funny. I didn't hear that. What was
I would say that like we don't consider that to be of the level.
I of the level.
Do you think that varies by company size though? And like
it's part of the job.
Okay.
Some staff engineering expectations are like you need to have impact beyond a certain sphere, and sometimes that can be like large public-facing open source work that expands beyond your team or the teams that can do it. So the work impacting larger groups than just your own and presenting the work that you're doing, that can be showing the work that you're doing that is affecting more than just your team.
Yeah, see, I think that's kind of what I was getting at. It's not that you can't tell your own story. It's that other people are willing to tell your story for you.
I think the nuance also goes back to the notes of like there are archetypes in this. There are different modes of operation as you exceed this, like I don't want to say exceed, as you move out of like a more rigid path. And the answer is hard to answer because there's a million different ways to do it. There's a really good actually open source book, the staff engineering, that like talks about all the different modes of operations, articulates all of these really, really well. It's absurdly nuanced.
Just to give you an example though, for like our practices for promotion, staff engineers write their own packets with consultation from their manager. Senior engineers, the manager writes the packet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's not true everywhere, but like that's kind of what I've heard is you start to get into the point where like you're more of a peer to whoever's leading you versus a subordinate.
I think it'd be really interesting to like look at like other professions like electricians, right? Like, or like, you know, woodworkers or whatnot and see, because I suspect there's a lot of the same things that happen where you're much more self-directed, you're much more like in charge of kind of multiple things and you're not, you know, no one's tasking you, right? Like, you know.
So I really like this. I've thought about it a lot. It kind of goes back to the old guilds of where you have apprentice journey craft. but it doesn't work that well in the software industry. I've been trying to make this work in my mind for years and always talking about it, but because there's so many different languages, many different technical skills, so many different stacks that you have to work in. Like it's really hard to it gets back into your titles and stuff too. It's really hard to measure that, right? Like in electrical engineering, it's a very clear path, right? Because there's specifications, everything you have to follow, and there's only a certain set of tools that you get to do. But in software, it's all over the map. So I think that's great, but it's really hard to button that down.
I actually have a blog post that says there's like 10 different kinds of senior engineers.
Yeah.
For different companies. Like because I could be a senior engineer, and I guarantee you for my startup or for a smaller company, and then I go to Stripe and I'm nothing like what they need. You know, so
yeah,
and vice versa. Cool. Does anyone have anything else? It was cool, and it feels like I don't know. It feels like the career stuff. Maybe we want to do a little more on career stuff. There was a lot of interest. Not that the accessibility stuff was great too.
I don't know. That was a lot of like the choir preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
though.
that's fair.
So
that's fair.
like there's a lot of energy,
I think
but
like communication is good, right? Like people hearing other perspectives of
Yeah.
other people. I like what you had to say about mentorship. I wonder if like as the tide has changed and the job market is tightened and the money is tightened, I feel like I don't know what things are like. Stripe is like a big successful company that's probably still doing well in this environment versus like my company that just had like huge layoffs, other companies having huge layoffs. I don't think companies that are like scraping close to the bone and trying to like stay like not out of business really care about the mentorship stuff, which I think is kind of tragic.
Yeah.
Because it's going to bite him in the ass.
Yeah, it's short term versus long term.
See, I disagree. I know
it's a great time. It's a great time to hire cheaper engineers.
We're speaking from different points of view, from different places, but like it's like this is going to sound intense, but it's like I feed my family this way, and so if there's someone on my team who's not producing at like a high enough level, and I can help them produce that, like that's going to help me bring food for my family. So I have like an interest in the person next to me, like doing an awesome job.
Sure, doing more.
I'm not doing it for the perf doc, right? I'm doing it because I actually like want our team to produce results. So
I do it because I enjoy it, but I think that like companies, when you are not a profitable company and you are funded and like you've got to make like decisions of like, are we going to ship this feature or are we going to have like a mentorship thing where this thing takes longer? They don't want the mentorship stuff.
Right.
And I think,
but if the concern is we need to ship this thing and there's someone who needs mentorship in order to meet that goal, then like that's the lever that you have to pull, right?
Sure, yeah.
And it's not to please the CEO of the company. It's because like, yeah, we're aligned. This is the goal. This is what we need to do to succeed. And this is the fastest way to get there, because me alone, I can't write all of this code.
Yeah.
That's where it's coaching or one-on-ones. It's not mentorship. It's the same thing, but you might just need to call it something else.
Yeah. You can also do it in little pieces too, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
I can understand like what you're saying in a perfect world, like totally get it, but like I don't think I'm explaining myself.
If you're cutting close to the bone, people don't give a shit about anything other than like getting the features out, and they are willing to sacrifice the long term for the short term.
Yeah, for sure.
The mentorship or the pair programming or whatever like that all gets tossed out the window.
It can be seen as frivolous. Paying for Tuple, $60 a month for Tuple is like, or Tuple, I don't know. Is something that is like not really worth it. Right.
Kevin, I think you were making a point and you got cut off. Did you have something more that you wanted to add?
I mean, what I was closing with was what's missing for me is the skill around just quality of the code that you write, which can be learned by books, but really just comes in time. And yeah, I don't think that's in your deck. I don't think we just skipped it.
No, you're right.
Okay.
We didn't just skip it. I think your point in my head fits here.
You brought it
I didn't actually raise it, but it's this idea that like you do have to have the design sense. You have to have the experience of well, I made a decision like this and I had to live with it, and I like that or I didn't like that, and that to your point, that comes with experience. You can't fake that.
You left off TAM versus spaces. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Get the right thing, get things done, the right things the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Aspect.
Love that.
I mean, I love ownership and I love opening with ownership, right? Like I would make that the number one too, but I don't know. I think it gets lost if you put it underneath ownership.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that craft, like kind of the idea of craft is its own top level theme.
Yeah, I mean, years and years ago, as I was probably reaching at senior level, right? We had a fresh Turing grad, and this guy kicks ass, right? Does everything in the ownership bucket, right? But when I would PR his code, I'm like, something's wrong here, right? You know, like, and I couldn't name it yet, but it was bad code. It was functionally perfect. Like, yeah, this guy was a rock star, but it just wasn't mature code yet. And so you start feeling that, and then you start being able to actually name that and write it the right way.
Is his name Jesse?
you remind me a lot of it. Yeah, no, you could be twins, but.
I hear that 100%. I agree.
Cool. I think Joel mentioned something that's really important that engineers are really bad at, and that's keeping track of your accomplishments. When you get pulled into a meeting and you're like, hey, why should you still work here? It's really hard to produce all this stuff on the spot. You have to, but having this long running thing can make it a lot easier to like kind of make that case for you to, you know, get a promotion or stick around.
The seminal work, the seminal work on this is it Julia Evans, Bragg Docs? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So my manager this quarter was having me write mine publicly, which is weird. Not like publicly, but like internally publicly as an exercise.
So I coach people to do that. Instead of building a resume, build like a career document of like every job you have, every project, every initiative, every technology you get involved in, and start keeping track of that. And then when you go build a resume, trim that down to one page to only the things that that company is going to care about, because someone's got to keep track of that. Someone's got to benchmark, you know, I made this code 20% faster, or I fixed, you know, 10% of the bugs, or like, you know, you got to talk about those impact statements, whether it's a brag doc for a promotion or whether you're going for another job. You got to be able to talk about that impact. And the only way you can do that is to start doing it while you're on the job, because once you leave, you forget half of the stuff you did there. Like I had to put a resume together, and I was like going through my old resumes, and I found a resume when I was at SendGrid. I had to apply for another role within SendGrid, and I had to come up with just a resume of just the things I did there. And I forgot half of what was on that document. I'm like, oh, I built an OAuth provider for one of the APIs that we built. Like, I completely blanked that I had done that. I'm like, oh, hey, now I've got that to add to all my other resumes. So, I mean, start doing that.
It's also we call it writing your performance review, like one day at a time. Because we are in the standard Microsoft like twice a year cycle, and you every 6 months have to produce like a fairly thorough document. And it's a lot easier if you write it one sentence every day than if you have to try and remember.
And not just technical stuff, because you know, I talked this customer off, you know, back off the ledge or whatever. that kind of stuff is very important too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're a manager, have your reports do that, right? Yeah. That was huge. It was like in the monthly. That was one of our items was, you know, what are the things that you're going to put on your year-end review? It's like, great to keep me to this monthly cadence of enumerating them, because yeah, you forget them all.
For me, it keeps me more accountable than my manager does, because I'm like, I got to write something down. You know, I got to end the day with a sentence.
I would go one step further and actually open source it. So be writing.
You first, right?
I do it all.
Probably already did.
Have you?
Is it an RSS feed?
Yeah.
Which you don't subscribe to. No.
But I tell this to young engineers all the time. It's like journal early, right? But make sure that you write and create a note within the web, right, of your writings, because you do it for yourself. But it's also really good for establishing yourself within the community and getting kind of your brand and name out there. And you should start as early as possible and be writing about all these things you're learning and synthesizing that information, because that'll go with you from every job. And then if the job requires you to, you know, transform it into something that's, you know, break document or something to manage it within a GitHub organization, yeah, you can do that. But that is yours. That you take with you. That you never lose. So
also a good measure of how much shit you're actually doing versus jerking around on the internet. Like, I mean, like if you, so I use Obsidian, a very free app. You can sync it, you don't have to pay for it. You put up an icon, sync it, like you're not supposed to do that, but you can.
You're probably supposed to do that.
Yeah, true. I mean, true, yeah. But like, and I, every single thing I do, like for work and even my other side stuff, I track it, workouts track the same thing every day. And I literally copy and paste that into the stand-up update in Slack. So I don't even have to mentally, there's no cognitive load. I just like dump it in there. And so, but once you, it's an easy habit and you do it every day.
Yeah. All right, folks, it's 8:20. Thank you all. Thank you.